The English Prem heats up with Derby weekend as Ulster Rugby stun the Bulls in the URC. All this and more on your favourite fan rugby podcast, the Ruck and Roll Show. Hello, Mr. Leach. How good is it to have the Prem Rugby back?
Yeah, I'm loving it so far. You're getting a better picture of where everybody's at the minute, and it's getting easier to predict, but also not so easy to predict. Like, the biggest shock of the weekend, I think, was definitely the Harlequins beating of Saracens. I don't think anybody saw that one coming. I don't know if you've seen all the stuff on Saracens' Instagram pages. I'm sure they would have been very disappointed that they didn't get to do a little gag. Gag for their victory.
Oh, right. Well, if you want, I'm not actually aware of this, but if you want to explain a wee bit more about that.
So they've been doing quite a clever thing where, first game of the season, they had Newcastle Red Bull. So it was just a video of someone stamping on a can of Red Bull. Second one was, I think it was like tearing the limbs off a teddy bear or something. And then the third one, obviously, because they were going to be Harlequins, there was jokes of it being like a Joker card being ripped in half or something. So, but instead, Harlequins came back, and it was a video of a massive Saracens balloon being popped. So,
oh yeah.
So
I know.
they got their own back.
I seen something like that. Yeah, it was like a month. I didn't put it together. It was all Saracens that were doing it. Yeah, no, that's quite funny. It's quite on brand for Saracens, because obviously Saracens, I think, is everyone's favorite team to sort of hate in the Prem, because they win everything. So it's very on brand for them to be pulling social media stuff like that. But yeah, no, that's good crack. You love to see that sort of thing around the game. To be fair, it adds a bit of spice to it, adds a bit of drama. But just a quick rundown of the shows. We've got the English Prem Derby weekend, so we're going to review all the fixtures there. URC, great round in the URC, a couple of big shocks in there, a couple of not so big shocks as well. And then we're going to go into a couple other things as well. Dom's done a little bit of commentary at the weekend, so we're going to talk through that and a bit of English Championship stuff. And then finish on the stories from the world of rugby as our 360 bite back at the rugby union's statement about their league. So all that to come down in the show, but I guess we'll start in the English Premiership with Bristol against Exeter. Now, this was, I think, one of the most hotly contested games of the weekend, finishing 18-14 to the home side, Bristol. What do you think of this game? I mean, we all came into this one, we weren't quite sure what was going to happen in terms of Exeter's sort of journey from last season into this season. They seem to be looking a lot stronger, and then Bristol, obviously, as we both see, as a contender for the English Prem. What did you make of the game and how it sort of unfolded?
I thought Bristol being at home, they'd have the advantage, obviously. That's why home and away games are played. But it was a scrappy game, which is what you want in a derby. It just had a bit of everything, red cards, injuries, good tries. It was, really hotly contested, and could have swayed either way. Exeter first half were really, really good, but then second half just didn't find anything, despite playing against 14 men or 15 men for a large part. But it was really entertaining, and I thought maybe that the injuries for Bristol would hinder them, but no, they played really well, and some real big standouts for them.
Yeah, well, it seems like they're getting a lot of their big players, but some of their big players back, like Ellis Genge came back into the lineup to captain the side, and I think he absolutely mullered Exeter scrum. Is absolutely crazy, and he was really showing his class, and players like Bill Mata with that lovely try for Bristol. Sort of, you mentioned the red card there. What was your sort of view on it with Tom Jordan? High shot on Ross Vincent, and do you think it was sort of warranted, or do you think it was a wee bit harsh?
I did think it was a bit harsh, because I didn't think there wasn't any malicious intent on it, but it's all about player safety at the minute, and so you kind of do have to understand it from that standpoint and why the referee's giving it. But yeah, I mean, some people would say game's gone, but no, I think it's you just have to accept it in these circumstances and just say, yeah, okay, whatever, crack on then.
Yeah,
But
well,
again, another big loss for another game week.
yeah, well, it's that 20-minute red card. It's not as good. It's not as bad as him having to be sent off for the whole game, but it certainly did make things spicy. Exeter showed some real fight in that game, I thought, as well, in terms of holding up Bristol at the line, on just what looked to be a certain try in the corner there. But yeah, no, Bristol hung in. Great kicking from Sam Worsley as well, the young fly half coming in. He kicked a conversion and a pen, which ended up being the difference between the two sides. So fair play to him. He looks like a good young talent for them. And then we move into Newcastle. Now, Newcastle Red Bulls, the big takeover. They've been a big topic of discussion in the past couple of weeks and how they would start the season. It's 3 losses, Dom. 1 to Saracens, 1 away to Exeter, and now 1 against Sale. Do you think it's a case of these are just really tough fixtures for them to start the season, or are we sort of seeing what their season is going to be, which is, it's maybe not going to be as exciting as the hype around it has suggested?
I think, yeah, you can put them into the category of, it's been tough games, but I think if they were going to get a result out of any of them, it was going to be the one at Sandy Park against Exeter. And even then, Exeter have showed that they've improved since last season. They've made some really positive transfers, and even then, they're not at full strength. They've drawn against Northampton in that really great game. Come close against Bristol. So that has been that step up from Exeter, but that hasn't been a step up from the Red Bulls. It's difficult when the majority of your players, or most of your big players, left at the end of the season because they weren't aware of this takeover, and then the only players that you've managed to bring in have been kind of ringers and older players. I think their best player so far this season has been their number 8, Amanaki Mafi. He's been like the best player for them so far, but it's difficult to say he's been the best player when not everybody, it's not been a very strong squad at all. But what was nice in this game is that you finally get to see Sharks playing some attacking rugby, because they've really struggled to come forwards in the first 2. Against Gloucester, they were the better side, but they just had nothing really. They were pretty lackluster against Bath. Yes, the conditions weren't great. Yes, this, that, and the other, but it just wasn't them. And then this was the perfect game to come in week 3 to show, ball in hand, running up the pitch. They are just up there. They're going to be up there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's quite interesting because you were saying last week sort of the lack of bite in attack, and then they go and put 57 points on the side the next week. It's just it's a classic commentator's curse for working in the other direction, I suppose. But yeah, no, I think Sale just real classic performance from them, just real power up front, just a strong set piece, and then George Ford just pulling the strings. Tom Ruback, what a player he is. I think coming into the autumn, he's probably in the hot seat, I would say. Would you say for the England back 3, or at least one of those 3 positions, or would you say it's a wee bit more sort of grey area with that sort of debate?
I think he'll definitely be in the conversation because he got called up for in the tour of USA. He's got that kind of on his side. He's been putting in some good performances. Hat trick last game. Yeah, he's definitely put his hat in the ring and made himself a serious contender. But there was a lot of players from that. The reason he got picked was because there were so many players away. You've got Tommy Freeman, you've got George Furbank, you've got a whole list of other players who are also vying for one of those places. It's going to be really interesting to see which route Borthwick goes, but I think Roebuck is definitely a player that fits into his system, so you might be able to see why he'll pick him.
You can see with the aerial prowess that he has that he's definitely one that that will sort of fit that profile. But when you've got Manny Feo Abuso performing like he's performing, Henry Arundel even coming back in for, and then who could forget the Lion Tommy Freeman as well? It's an absolute embarrassment of riches there. sort of Red Bull. So they've parted ways with Steve Diamonds. They've got in Alan Dickens as a new head coach, and they've sort of changed the management structure with bringing Gregor Townsend in as a consultant, which is quite interesting. Sort of thing. I think I've seen somewhere that Johnny Wilkinson might be coming in as well in a capacity. So what do you make of those sort of changes, and how that will sort of affect the way sort of Newcastle play and their run?
I see both sides of it, because I can understand why they've gotten rid of Steve Diamond, because he is obviously not the person that is going to be the one to carry them forwards going into the future. However, when they're in such a phase of transition, stability is what you need at a time like this. So keeping him in isn't going to be a bad thing, because, he could still get the odd performance. He could still get good things out of these players, whether it's the right things at this moment. And it probably actually is, because, as I say, it's what you need when you've had so much change, is a bit of stability in the coaching role, because these players know how to play in his system. But now that you've getting rid of a lot of your players and your head coach, you're kind of just in a position looking around going, what do we do now?
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one. I've seen Gregor Townsend was getting some stick for joining that role. I think people were maybe thinking, "Oh, is this him moving on to the Red Bulls now?" But I think he sort of firmly put that one to bed. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how the Red Bulls sort of they've got Northampton this weekend, so at home, so they'll be looking to try and get something from that game. Get a couple of points on the board, even. But that'll be another tough one for them. There's no easy games in this league. But then it was on to Bath, who put their West Country rivals Gloucester to the sword at the Wreck. I mean, what an embarrassment of riches. You speak about the England wing, the Bath rugby or just have an embarrassment of riches, don't they?
Yeah, it's stupid. Really, you've got Henry Arundel, Joe Cocknesinger, Tom de Glanville, Santi Carreras, Chris Harris, and then adding into that back line of Finn Russell, Max Ajomo, Ollie Lawrence. It's just a bit unfair, really. I said this at the start of the season, how good their backline is. I mean, just how good the player depth they've got around the park is it's pretty ridiculous. And even then, like Bath weren't full tilt. They weren't full strength, I wouldn't say. Ben Spencer wasn't playing. Thomas Toy was on the bench. Miles Reed was on the bench. Like there was players who had been dropped. So
yeah, well, that's the thing. But it was sort of it's a much of a muchness, because then you look at their back row and you've got like Guy Pepper in there and Sam Underhill, and it's like, you can bring either on, you can start either, and you're gonna get a sort of same system, and it's just it's something that I'll be very excited to see in terms of the European competition. I know they'll be hot favourites for the Premiership this year with the amount of depth they do have and winning it last year. But I think in Europe it'll be interesting to see how they can fare against those big boys in Bordeaux, who are struggling in the top 14, and Toulouse as well, and Leinster. You have to throw them in there as well, I suppose. What do you make of this sort of Finn Russell coming back in and Max Ajomo, sort of that sort of 10, 12, 13 with Lawrence as well? Do you think that's sort of the way forward for them going into this season?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, Max Ajomo proved in the first couple of games that he can do it at 10. So he's got the handling to be able to fit in that 12 jersey, and going forwards as well, he's very strong. So I don't see why not. If you've got a system and it works, then don't interrupt it, kind of thing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But yeah, it's a very attractive kind of line going down. But when as I say, when you put Ben Spencer in there, when you somehow squeeze Santi Carreras into there, I think unfortunately it's going to be Tom de Glanville who gets dropped.
And Tom de Glanville was fantastic in this game, wasn't he? He was just marshalled the backfield very well. He scores that try. He was just absolutely amazing, and he was great last season as well. You turn an eye on to Gloucester though. That's 3 defeats for them in their opening 3. Lost a lot of players like Santi Carreras, like Gareth Anscombe, George Skivington. Do you think he's got something to be worried about this season in terms of turning his side into sort of contenders for that top 6, or do you think this is more of a transition year for them?
I think it definitely is a transition period. I think going into it, they knew that it wasn't going to be, they weren't going to be fighting for a top 4 spot, a playoff spot. And you look at their pack. I think it was it just Seb Blake that was like a constant in their pack from last season. So, even looking at that, we've got 8 players one out of 8 players who haven't really played together. So there's going to be a lack of cohesion. Of course, there's going to be, it's not going to gel as well. So I think, like you say, definitely a period of transition for them. I think they've probably set their anticipation as quite low because, and that's not because of the quality of Gloucester. It's because of all the changes they've had. You lose 2 of your biggest players to your rivals. It's tough to kind of adjust to that. But yeah, I mean, they're still scoring points. That's the only good takeaway. It's not like they get doing what Newcastle have done and not really getting over the whitewash. Like Newcastle were lucky to score against Sale to actually get any points on the board. So 3 tries still from the game. It's at the Rec. It's still. You've got to see the positives where as little as they may shine.
Yeah, and there were some really good tries in that game. I mean, they've still got some great players like Seb Atkinson, Charlie Atkinson. There's still a very strong team. Thomas Williams, who's their new club captain. They can still hurt teams definitely in this league, but I think it is just a case of they're going up against teams like Bristol, again, like teams like Bath, even around them, and the amount of quality these sides have, it's sort of hard to keep up with that. So I think it probably would look like it is going to be a transition year for them, unfortunately. But moving on to the East Midlands derby, now this was a very interesting watch. 32-26 in the end to Northampton Saints, to Anthony Bellew, the new summer signing from France, ending up to get the game-winning try after a superb bounce, has to be said. The most wicked bounce you'll ever see, really, in your favour. He chips it over. It lands about 10 metres to the right of him, and then it just bounces back just right into his hands. Absolutely beautiful. But what do you make of this one in terms of Saints? They're working on a lot of Lions ones back. Henry Pollock, I know he's a favourite of yours. Tommy Freeman, Alex Mitchell, Finn Smith. What do you make of the Saints? I guess their credentials as contenders potentially for this season.
I'm yet to be convinced by Saints. I think it's great that they've got all these players back. Finn Smith played very well. I was also very impressed with Alex Mitchell as well. I thought he had a very good game, and it's good to see that he's carried on his form from the Lions, because I thought he was, very deserving of that number 21, 22 jersey for the Lions in the tests. So yeah, very good from him. But you look at the opposition they were playing, they were at home against Leicester. So should they have got more from that game because of the transition that Leicester are also going through? We spoke about it last week and in previous weeks about how, they've lost 6 massive players from their squad, and yet they were in 6 points of Northampton, who have just got back all their Lions players. I'm not, as I say, I'm not 100% convinced, but yes, I won't deny that it was a good performance from Saints, and there will be more to come from them. But I just want to see that proof before I go, yeah, Northampton nailed on top 4 kind of thing.
And how important are players like Bellew when you consider they'll have a lot of players going away with England? So players like Bellew in terms of sort of bitching them up when they don't have those players in the autumn and the Six Nations.
I think I'm going to come from a bit of a biased point of view here. I think Bellew being there will improve Finn Smith because he's actually got competition. In the first couple of games, Bellow's been he's been integral in the performances, and coming off the bench to then score 2 tries. That's huge. And we all know the quality that Finn Smith possesses. So I think him having a bit of healthy competition is only going to be a good thing. Because he won't go into this season thinking I've got the 10 shirt nailed on because I'm a British and Irish Lion now. Yeah, I'm a British and Irish Lion, but I've also got someone who's putting in massive performances week in, week out. So I've got to up my game 1 notch still. So yeah, I think it can be only be positive.
Yeah, it's good that they've got him tied down, I suppose, to a contract extension there as well. That'll sort of weigh off any of the rumours about R360 and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, their teams are looking strong, and it'll be interesting to see how they do this season. But as you had sort of alluded to, a bit of a shock at the stoop, especially with Harlequins sort of tough start to the season, but they came in and they beat Saracens 20 points to 14. Marcus Smith back in the side. We know how huge he is for them and how big he has been for the last couple of years. What do you make of this game, and where do you think Saracens, or where do you think Harlequins got the better of Saracens in this one?
From battles, probably. I think Chandler Cunningham South had a very strong game. He was just being quite a bit of a nuisance and almost silenced Tom Willis a little bit. With the London derby, I think this is always a very fiercely competitive game, and it's definitely one that whoever wants it more will claim it. Not necessarily the better team, and as Harlequins have demonstrated, it's if you want it more, you'll get it. And yeah, I definitely think it was just in those kind of forward battles. Guido Petty coming in was brilliant. Chandler Cunningham South, as I say, Will Evans has always been a brilliant player so far this season, and just Marcus Smith, he had an absolute stormer. I think what was it? Only 5 points that he didn't score in that game. It's mental. So yeah, the kudos has to go to him on this one, but it was just a really good team effort, I think.
Well, they needed that badly. I think it was one of the games probably would have highlighted early on in the season. It's a big fixture, as always, against Saracens. It's also one at the Stoop, and after their 2 losses, I think that it's one that they definitely had to win. Just before, before we congratulate Harlequins anymore, what about that Fergus Burke try? That has to be the try of the weekend, surely. Yeah. I mean, what was it? Two switch, I think, in that move. But
I'm sure I've got no doubt that when the autumn internationals roll about, he'll be in that England training squad for sure.
I think so, yeah. Do you think he'll be involved in the mix for the tests as well?
I think it's a difficult one because he is so good that you can't not have him in the squad. One, as an influence, but two, just his ability. Other players in those positions, like Max Ojomo, if he was able to learn from Owen Farrell, he's just going to improve tenfold. I think the importance that he will bring will be so good. But whether he should be in a starting jersey, I'm not sure. Not because of his quality, but just because of how, I don't even know how old he is now, 34, 33, around that age. He's not the future of England. He was, but now he's got to kind of take a back seat, come on as an impact player and kind of see out a game. He's not one to create the magic from the start, I don't think. He could, but I don't think he should.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point that you make there. Looking into this weekend's fixtures, though, we'll talk about Harlequins first, because I think it's very fascinating to see sort of how they develop off the back of this win. They face Exeter in Devon. That's the final kick-off of the weekend. Exeter targeting the second home win of the season. Quinn sort of, as I say, wanted to build on that momentum. Exeter will have Lennox Gatow and Tom Hooper coming into the mix. They're 2 new Australian Simons, two of probably the hottest Australian prospects right now in terms of form. They were really 2 of their best players in the rugby championship. How do you reckon this one's going to
go? I think it will sway in favour of Chiefs. I think I've mentioned before that the depth that Quins have in comparison to other teams is definitely lower down the pecking order in the table. But if Chiefs play the way that they've been playing so far, they really can knock any opponent out of the water. And being at home at Sandy Park, I think the home crowd will just be that extra lifter to get them over the line. So yeah, I think Chiefs. I think Slade has already come out this week and said he's really looking forward to playing with Lenny Cattell. So that centre partnership is it's going to be good.
It's power, and it's just ball handling skill, it's kicking, it's everything. Like that is my Fortin prospect, and especially when you add someone like Tom Hooper into that back row with Fisilao, I think I'm
Yeah,
saying
for
that right.
Slough.
Yeah, when you add in him to that pack, I think that's just he'll be an absolute nuisance to play against for all these English sides. It's interesting. We'll touch on that more later, but Hooper and Hikatow, they'll not be playing for not South Africa. They'll not be playing for the Wallabies in the first two tests, so it seems like they're sort of prioritising settling down at the Chiefs there, and that's all good news for Devon, perhaps not good news for Sydney. But another big game of that weekend in the West Country is Gloucester v Bristol. Now Gloucester, coming off the back of 3 defeats, face a Bristol side who have a lot of injury problems themselves. 2 wins out of 3 for them though. Where do you reckon this one's going to go? Do you think Gloucester can get their first win on the board with all of Bristol's problems?
Yeah, I think if they were going to do it against any team, it's going to be Bristol. It's just one of those where it's almost a bit of like a bogey side for them, maybe, just because it's also quite, it's a bit of a derby. I think it's closest oppositions anyway. So yeah, I think they could cause an upset, but also, do you know what? No, I'm going to stick to my guns. I think yes, Gloucester will cause an upset. I think being at home, being at Kingsholm, and the players, I think just the players that Bristol are missing, it can really take an effect. Yes, Genge will be there, but equally, Fasogbon last season in that fixture absolutely destroyed Ellis Genge, and there's the classic thing of Ellis Genge getting subbed off and Fasogbon just giving him a wave as he walked off. So yeah, I think
he's
some
character.
He is some character, and it'll be good to see him in the England squad as well, coming up for this one. But yeah, I think he'll be. I think it'll be a Gloucester win for that one.
Yeah, and then we've got a Premier League final, not Premier League, the Prem Rugby. I'm thinking football for some reason. We've got a Prem Rugby final repeats at Welford Road, Leicester v Bath. Do you think this is sort of a bit of a, considering Tigers' early season form, do you think this is a bit of a walkover?
I don't think a walkover. I think obviously Leicester will still give their home crowd something to sing about, but I do think it's a perfect time. Get Santi Carreras in to see what he can do at 15 in this squad. Yeah, but I think it'll be 40 plus points that Bath will put on the board.
And to agree with that assessment, to be fair, they just look so dangerous so far this season. And then Saracens v Sharks. Now that's an interesting one. Probably two of the top 4 contenders, I would say, for this league. Do you think Saris can bounce back from that London derby defeat?
Again, being at home, that always carries so much weight. But if Sharks play the way they did against Newcastle and with that confidence, again, similar to Exeter, not many teams will stop them. So I think this will probably be the best game of the weekend, I'd say, because it will be so fiercely competitive. It could really sway either way. So I wouldn't want to call this one, but if I had to, I'm going to be a little bit biased. I'd say that Sale would nick it, but
Sale will nick it. Yeah, interesting. It says. I think I just fancy a Saris home victory with that. To be honest, I don't think they usually lose 2 on the bounce. They'll bounce back this week. But that was our Prem Rugby roundup there. Now that moves us on to URC. A couple of interesting results this weekend. Cardiff edging Connacht at the Arms Park with Tom Bowen, who scored 2 tries in that game. 5 tries in his last 2 games, both against Irish teams. He's looking very good. He might, with that Wales squad coming out next week, he could be in with a shout with them. He's absolutely rapid, Dom, isn't he?
Yeah, I can't
second try,
the
second
interception.
Yeah.
There was no stopping him. Yeah, he's just rapid, isn't he?
Yeah, Cardiff are looking decent. There's a couple of good results early on the season, and I think they've got fairly high aspirations in terms of trying to get sort of top 8 and try and get in that playoffs. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Callum Sheedy also looking very good for them. He could be another man. I think that Wales 10 jersey, Dom, I'm not sure what you think, but I think that's a very sort of open position. I think it's still to be decided. It's not like the Scottish 10 or the Irish. Well, Irish 10 is supposed to be a bit more up in the air as well.
No, I completely. Yeah. We'll get onto that. No, I think you're right. I think the Wales 10 jersey is definitely up for debate, but I think I think there's only probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 Welsh jerseys that are kind of only nailed on. You know, you probably say Daft Jenkins in the second row. He's definitely claiming one. Obviously, now that Rhys Ammett's back, he probably got one. Bowen, you could see him now claiming that other wing shirt. You know, they're starting to have them nailed on. But
Jink Bowen's not that far into the debate. Like, he's in, like, you.
I think if you're going off form, you have to put him in there. The only other, you know, if you're going off kind of reliance, maybe you put Rio Dyer in there. But I know that he's not the biggest fan across Welsh fans, so.
Yeah, he's got the talent, he has, but yeah, it's a tricky one. I think Thomas Williams, if you look in that back line, Thomas Williams nailed on.
Yeah.
Maybe got a couple of centres, maybe Nick Tompkins, Jack Morgan, obviously, and then a couple of front row players, you know, Nicky Smith and Dowie Leck, probably. But yeah, it's probably between Callum Sheedy, really, and Callum Sheedy and Dan Edwards, really, for that 10 jersey. But interesting to see whether he goes probably for Sheedy, who's slightly more experienced on the international stage, or Dan Edwards, who maybe has got, I suppose, a higher ceiling, you know, being the younger player. Result of the weekend, and this is not just from a biased point of view, Ulster 28 and the Bulls 7. I mean, what a result for the Ulstermen in Belfast. The Bulls with a lot of their internationals in this game. Andre Pollard, Marco van Staden, Wilco Lowe, just like a fairly strong, you know, Keenan Moody as well. You know, a really strong. Really, yeah, it wasn't David Creel, I believe.
David Creel.
So yeah, really huge result for the Ulstermen there. I think just in that game I was watching it, it's the line speed Ulster brought, they just didn't give the Bulls an inch really, and they like fronted up with their pack as well, and that's always something that I suppose have to. It seemed like they even went after their pack, which is not something you'd sort of associate teams doing against South African teams, because the pack's so dominant usually. But they really like got into them, got in their faces. Journo Augustus, I mean, what a signing!
It took the words straight out of my mouth. Yeah. Him and Uzachukwu, I think, massive players in that Ulster squad.
Yeah, no, they bring that real physicality and athleticism to the team. Both scored tries in this game. I think both of them will be looking again into their national sides in this autumn. Chukwu will probably be on the sort of outskirts of the Irish squad, you know, and you consider the sort of strength in the back row, and you maybe even say the same for Augustus. But I think they're both boys that are certainly upcoming stars for their nations. I think I sort of heard something that Augustus was maybe wanting to play more games against South African side, so he could maybe sort of give that sort of more lasting impression than he has been sort of playing in the Premiership, not as much against South African sides, only in Europe, I suppose. It was a superb performance from him, and great performance from Ulster, and that's 2 wins from them. Obviously had that fixture cancelled last week, but they're looking decent this year, and I'm very happy to see a result like that. They'll travel to South Africa now for the Sharks and the Lions games, but moving on to the Sharks, we're down quite comfortably in Dublin by Leinster. Probably a fairly predictable result, this one, in terms of Leinster welcoming back a lot of their internationals at the Aviva Stadium. Sharks, you know, they don't seem to be be gelling. You know, that's 2 defeats and a draw for them. They made the semi-finals of the URC last year. It's just really poor start for them, and they'll be really needing to get that victory against Ulster when they go back to Durban. But I thought one man I'd sort of like to highlight in this game was Jamie Osborne. I looked at him when he was playing for the Lions in the summer, and looked at him when he's playing for Ireland in the last sort of year or so since he broke through. And I think he is, Dom, I don't know about you, but I think he's the future of that outside backline for Ireland. I think he's so versatile, but he's just the quality that he has. He's just consistent performer as well. What do you think about Jamie Osborne, sort of his credentials and what he can add to, I guess, that Irish backline and the Leinster backline going forward?
I mean, personally, I'm not the biggest watcher of the URC, but him coming into the Lions squad was a bit of an unknown. I wasn't really too sure, you know, where this guy was coming from, but you know, in the game that he played, he was brilliant. And looking at this game, he put in a very good performance as well, first half try. But I think you're absolutely right. He's definitely going to be a big character for both Leinster and for Ireland going forward. And, you know, he's still very young, still, I think he's 23, 24. So yeah, he's definitely in his early years of playing, and has probably got a World Cup or two in him if he stays in good form.
Yeah, well, I think that Lions tour in the summer, I think he was on the outskirts, as you could see, of that squad of the initial selection. Given his versatility, I think the skill set he's got, his kicking, he's strong, he's fast, he plays the Irish and the Leinster system down to a T, exactly what you want really from a Leinster backfield player. But yeah, he was absolutely fantastic in this game, and 5 very important points for Leinster, it has to be said, after those 2 defeats in South Africa. But then it was the Glasgow who battered the Dragons at Scotstoun 49-0 in the end. Dragons, it was quite disappointing in this one, I think, because they obviously got that result last week against the Sharks. 17-all, you know, and it looked like, can they build on the points that they got and build on the performance that they showed against the Sharks? But it was just an absolute walkthrough, really. I mean, Glasgow with Sione Tuipulotu back in the picture, George Horn just running the show at 9. Absolutely fantastic performance from them. Glasgow, you'd probably have to see them as contenders again for this URC, just with the amount of quality and the depth that they have. And then it was their Scottish rivals, Edinburgh, who just ran Munster incredibly close in Cork. 1 point in it at the end, 20 points to 19. Edinburgh welcoming back Darcy Graham and Duan van der Merwe and Pierre Schumann back into the fray, but they were unable to obviously get the better of Munster. I think it was a classic Munster performance, really, you know, just grit, just showed up and
fronting up
really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how they do with Europe this season. And then it was Benetton, Dom. Like I think the 2 Italian teams, obviously Zebra maybe not so much this weekend, but they've looked really good so far in this URC. They battered the Lions, Treviso, 41-15, 4 tries for former Harlequin Dom, Louis Lina in this game. He is absolutely rapid, isn't he?
Yeah, he's really good. Because he was injured a lot of last season as well, so we didn't probably get the most out of him, and kind of went back under the radar, especially in the Six Nations, because I think that's when a lot of English fans will kind of see Italian players come into the forefront of people's minds, and otherwise they're just kind of a bit forgotten about. But no, Louis Lina, if he's fit and fighting for a spot in the Italian team, he'll definitely be making the squad for sure. And it's handy as well when you're playing with a player like with Menoncello, who is I absolutely think is world class.
Yeah. He's a good to watch, to be fair. Yeah, it's a huge result for Benetton. A bit worrying for the Lions so far in the URC. I think they've obviously lost players like Edville van der Merwe. You know, they're maybe not. It looks to be maybe a tougher season for them, and that's just when I'm mentioning their away kit. Have you seen their away kit, Dom? It's like the whole multicolored affair.
Oh yeah, it's pretty.
I don't
disgusting.
I don't know what they were thinking with that. Just all these different funky shapes and stuff like that. But it's not the best to look at, to be fair. And the rugby wasn't the best to look at the weekend, unfortunately for them. But we'll see how they get on. Yeah, it's not a great one, but we'll see how they get on if they can bounce that back. And then it was the Ospreys who did bounce back against Zebra, 24-0 in the end. They did miss out on a bonus point at their first game of the season at the Brewery Field after 2 losses in South Africa. Decent performances in South Africa as well, to be fair. Zebra, 33 missed tackles in this game. Ospreys really just dominated it. I don't know how they didn't get a bonus point victory, to be honest. They had a chance to right at the end, just that knock on at the end. Just that sort of lack of accuracy. They really probably needed to get 5 points there when you consider sort of, I guess, we're usually being one of the weaker sides in the division. But I'd probably want to highlight one of the players here in in this game, Morgan Morse, their number 8, and who I think has been really, really solid for them for a number of years now, and he hasn't got really into the Wales selection. But could this be big, powerful number 8? Do you think he could push for selection when you consider maybe Talupe Alisai not being in the running?
Yeah, I think he'd be definitely a good one to have in the works for sure. But I think the back row for Wales has always been it's always been a stronger area in quite a weak squad, because you've had Tommy Reffel, Jack Morgan, and Aaron Wainwright, who have always kind of held on to those positions. I know sometimes Wainwright's come off the bench when Faletau came back, and some people were arguing you can't have Reffel and Morgan playing together, but I think when you look at those three, you think of those three immediately when you're thinking of Wales back row. So yeah, I think if Morse has, kind of got those three to look at, then I don't see why not. I don't see why he can't be in the squad. Ross Moriarty,
it's another one of those positions, Dom, which it's a bit up in the air. It's a bit like, who's going to take this? And this is, I think, probably a problem for Wales, where they need players to sort of put their hands up and say, this is my position, especially in a position as key as number 8, as key as 10. They need someone to put their hands up for this. So it'll be interesting to see who Steve Tandy goes for. Be interesting to see what profiles of players he goes for as well, because obviously he'll not choose the same players that Matt Sherratt and then Warren Gatland have chose before him, because it'll be a different sort of style. But yeah. And then it was the Scarlets who got absolutely battered by the Stormers 34-0. Quite a worrying start to the season for the Scarlets. So they didn't play last week against Connacht. That game was called off due to a storm. But they lost that first game as well. They've qualified for Europe. They have a lot of sort of young Welsh talent, Dom. You look at players like Ellis Mee, Blair Murray, all these different in Plumtree as well. A lot of young Welsh talent. Do you think this is just a case of Stormers just being really, really strong, or do you think Scarlets have got some stuff to be worried about this season, especially when you consider the quality they'll have to play in the Champions Cup?
I think it's a bit of both. I think Scarlet, obviously, like you say, Scarlets are a very young side, but the quality that the Stormers have is mental. Obviously, we've spoken so much about him, about Sasha and Ngomazulu. Willemse was playing, obviously, as well. Coetzee at hooker, Roos at number 8. So yeah, there's a lot of quality in that squad. So you would have expected a winning performance from the Stormers, but to nil them is an impressive feat.
First time in 18 years in the league. I saw Scarlets have been nilled in a game, which is quite historic. That's quite a worrying stat. That I think nilled in rugby. I think that's got to be one of. If I was a coach, I think that's one of the biggest embarrassments. Like, I would much rather, just getting points on the board. I just don't. It's not that difficult, I don't think, because you can get a penalty within distance and just get 3 points on the board. I'd much rather lose 34-3 than 34-0, because it's just so much more embarrassing. But yeah, I think if I was a coach, that would be, and even if I was managing a rubbish squad, then I'd just say, just get 3 points each week. Just get some points on the board. Yeah, that certainly does help when you're thinking about the embarrassment. Coming up this week, we got some interesting tosses. We got Edinburgh versus Benetton, two sort of sides who will be looking to sort of push towards the playoffs. Connacht face the Bulls. The Bulls will need to improve from last week's performance. They really poor against Ulster, and Connacht, if they play like that against Connacht, they'll end up in a similar fashion, I would imagine. Dragons Cardiff in the sort of the East Wales derby at Rodney Parade. That'll be an interesting one to see. Cardiff will be looking to sort of add to their momentum against sort of the Dragons side, coming off a bit of a whooping in Glasgow. Lions facing the Scarlets. Lions will be looking to bounce back. Scarlets will be looking to try and get something out of their double header in South Africa. And then it's Sharks versus Ulster, which will be quite an interesting one. Ulster coming in with a lot of momentum, but famously not really performed that well against South African sides in away from home.
Do you fancy your boys?
No, because I think we're looking really, really solid. Like, that performance, I can't lie, from Ulster, that performance against the Bulls is one of the best performances I've seen in years from Ulster. Like, honestly, because I think we controlled the game as well, Dom. We didn't there was no usually we go ahead and if we do play well in the game, we go ahead in the game and then maybe can see a couple of tries makes it a wee bit closer than you probably want it to be. But just really great performance from 1-80. Really, I think they've got a chance. I think if they are going to do it, or if they are going to beat the Sharks in South Africa, which they have done before, they've got a good chance basically this weekend. Is what I'm trying to say. Coming off a bit of form, the Sharks maybe not performing as well. They'll be a bit desperate for a result as well. So hopefully Ulster can make that play into their hands and build a bit of momentum. Then it's an Irish derby, Leinster versus Munster at Croke Park. It'll be a big one. It always is at Croke Park. Munster will be looking to put one on the Leinster men there. Zebra versus Stormers. Stormers will look to add to their momentum as well. They're looking like one of the hottest teams in the league so far. 3 wins to start off their campaign. And then it'll be Ospreys versus Glasgow at the Brewery Field in Regent to finish off the weekend's fixtures. See if Ospreys can build on their victory over the Zebra. But we'll move it on to that is our URC roundup, and we'll move it on to our next section of the show, which is talking a bit about the English Championship. But before we talk about the English Championship, we'll talk about one of the English Championship's commentators this weekend. So, Mr. Dominic Leach, would you like to tell us who you were commentating for and what game you were commentating for and how your experience went?
So on the weekend of last week, I was asked to go up to Doncaster and commentate on their game against Cambridge, which I duly accepted. And it was just, I had a really great experience. It was a bit of a trial run for me to hopefully do more games in the future. Yet to find out if I've got more coming my way, but it was definitely a good start. I felt it went quite well on my part. I had a good lead commentator as well, which was helpful. So who knows? Maybe you'll be hearing far more of this voice in the future. So,
would you like to tell us a wee bit more about Clubber TV and sort of where you can find them and sort of where they sort of post their content on?
So, Clubber TV are an Irish company. They launched into the world of Gaelic football, and kickstarted off their niche doing that, and then they decided to move over to England. They do a few National League games. They also branched out to the Champ and signed a multi-year deal with them. So they've got a good brand going so far. It started off, they built something in one place and they've transferred and are looking to expand, which is really good. And not just in one sport, they now cover 3 sports, but they do a lot of content on Instagram. They've got a bit going on TikTok too, but clubbertv.co.uk is their main base where you can.
And they do they live stream the matches? Live stream the matches and then put
live
clips
stream
out.
all the games. Yeah, and then they post clips here and there. But with your subscription, you can watch all games. You can log into different devices and watch them all at the same time if you really wanted to. And you can also go back and watch the games too. So, a very good thing for the Champ, and it was a good thing for me as well.
Yeah,
getting a bit of experience.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, no, well, this is what it's all about, guys. It's for for you guys watching me and Dom, big rugby fans, but also sort of trainee journalists, sort of wanting to break into the industry and do presenting, do commentating, do punditry. So absolutely huge, great news for you there, Dom. And what was your sort of favorite bit about it? I guess you'd say from the whole day.
I think just doing it, just actually like experiencing it, going through the motions of having a mic check, getting your mic, and kind of then having to sit down, go through each team, compare notes of who the players watched for the game, and just going through the motions of it all was just it was quite surreal. But then you have to kind of get rid of that excitement and just be like, right, you've actually got a job to do here, so just crack on with it, and relax and just have fun.
Yeah, and it helps that it was definitely your beloved Doncaster Knights as well. You might have the inside scoop on them, to be fair.
Yeah, I did my best to stay impartial with them. I will say that.
Yeah, of course.
I wasn't favouring them too much, but I gave them a little bit of flack in the first half.
Really?
Yeah, they were 14-10 up at half time, but also 10-0 down inside 30 minutes. So it was quite a rubbish start for the Knights, and they fought back very well. Got a try just before, or 2 tries just before the break, and then in the second half they just came out rampant and claimed victory.
Yeah, showed their quality. Well, at least you didn't have to hold back your frustration for very long in that game. But yeah, it was an interesting night. We talk about it. It was an interesting round of fixtures. In the English champ, have Ampthill beating the Cornish Pirates, Coley beating Richmond, Coventry just beating Bedford Blues, Doncaster, as I say, battering Cambridge, Trailfinders beating Chinnor very comfortably, and Hartbury just beating Worcester as well. So yeah, big weekend fixtures there. And yeah, what did you make of it? And sort of, I guess, where do you think this championship is shaping up for this season?
So I'll start with the Hartbury Worcester. I think this was probably the biggest shock of the weekend because everybody everybody expects so much from Worcester, but they're a bit like, they're on a similar line as the Red Bulls in the fact that, it's transition. They're just coming back into the league. They've had, they've got a 40-man squad who have never played together. So I think it's going to take a bit of time for them to gel properly and start consistently getting results. But Hartbury, I wrote them off at the start of the season because they were so heavily dependent on Gloucester players in the past, but they've got Harry Bazalgette at number 10, who just absolutely runs the show for them and was just brilliant once again. And Hartbury, put in a really good performance, claimed a narrow victory. So yeah, kudos to them. They're still proving why they did so well last season, and they don't often lose at home. They only lost once last season. So yeah, very, very strong squad. Until being led by Dave Ward, as we mentioned last season. They also were lucky enough to have Noah Kalori in their team.
Young Saracens player.
If Saracens and Ampthill have quite a close relationship, sending over players on loan. So he came in, scored 2 tries for them. So yeah, definitely helped them out. And yeah, another good performance by Ampthill. And because it was quite close at half time, all these games were quite close, really. 14 all at half time. But yeah, disappointing again for Cornish, who are sitting quite close to the bottom of that table. Richmond, doing really well at the moment. Gallagher got a hat trick, scoring 3 in about 42 minutes. But Coley, like I say, they're just producing really good results, especially at home. They've had 2 on the bounce now, but next week will be a bit of a tougher challenge as they face, I think they've got Nottingham away. So Nottingham away on Friday night is always quite a tough game. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. Bedford not firing on all cylinders at all. 2 games, 2 losses. They have faced Ealing and they have faced Coventry, so it's 2 big fixtures. But Coventry at home again, the home advantage it plays into teams' hands so much in this league. So you've really got to put in a solid performance to overturn a side on their own patch. But no, Coventry looking so strong this season. And weren't at full strength. They signed Morgan Atherley-Jones from Gloucester at the start of the season. So, and him not being in the squad, it didn't seem to matter too much. As I say, Coventry went on to win that one, and Ealing just absolutely bullying teams left, right, and centre. 9 tries, I want to say, against Chinnor. And they're quite big rivals because a lot of Ealing like to loan a lot of their players to Chinnor as a bit of a feeder, which I don't agree with because of the whole you're in the same league kind of thing. So so I don't know. Yeah, they weren't full strength. They changed 6 of their starting 15, and it didn't seem to matter because the quality is just there. It's kind of like they're the Bath of the champ, can just change their squad so much and it not affects the result. But a former uni mate of ours, George Shaw, was playing for Ealing, came off the bench and scored their final try. So it was good for him, and good to see that he's still performing well. And there was a game.
That's a big like Ealing to play for Ealing. Like that's a big step for him. Like
yeah. So he's doing really well, which is good. And there was a Friday night game as well. London Scottish welcomed Nottingham at the Rag. But Nottingham Friday nights, as I say, they love to play on a Friday night. Even if they're not at home, they can still produce a very good victory. And they did so with a bonus point win at the Rag, as I say, in Richmond.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. As always, that's a bit like the Prem. That's always a very hotly contested league, very exciting games in that one. But that's rounds us up on our championship review for the week, and that moves us on to a couple of news stories from the world of rugby. And the biggest one is undoubtedly the R360. It's quite funny because literally, I think maybe just before or just as soon as we are starting the podcast, I think last week we had the response from R360 to the rugby unions, or maybe shortly after the podcast, which is quite annoying from a journalistic standpoint. But anyway, we had the response from R360 to obviously the rugby unions of Ireland, Scotland, England, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, France, and Italy, all coming out against basically the R360, saying we're open to new investment, new ideas, but we've got to think about player welfare, we've got to think about the rugby ecosystem. So that was all sort of the responses that were given last week. And now R360 has come out after that, Dom, and has basically said and I quote, it's not always easy to embrace new opportunities, but but as we've seen throughout history, it's essential to grow any sport. So many players love the R360 and what it can do for them, and we can't wait to kick off next year. Player welfare is one of the key reasons we are creating our Global series, which will reduce player load and capture the attention of a new generation of fans globally. We want to collaborate as part of the rugby calendar. The series is designed with bespoke schedules for men's and women's teams, and R360 will release all players for all international matches as written into their contracts. Our philosophy is clear. If players want to play for their country, they should have that opportunity. Why would unions stand in their way? We look forward to submitting to the next World Rugby Council for sanctioning next summer as planned. So it really seems like R360 are wanting to put this one through, and they're not backing down from it. They're not backing down from the unions. What do you make of that statement, Dom? Is there anything that sort of stands out to you there?
Yeah, there's a bit about how a lot of players think this will benefit their careers. I'm sure they will, but these are also players who are past their peak. These are players who are just wanting a bit of retirement money, I think. I'm so adamantly against it. I just don't think it will be a positive thing for the game. I don't know if you'd also seen, obviously the NRL in Australia are so, they have quite a strong link with the Australian rugby union side and how a lot of players go over to there. But the NRL have turned around and said, if anybody wants to go play for R360, you will be banned from playing in the NRL for 10 years. Wow. So it's, there's unions around that are putting their stamp out and saying, if you want to do this, by all means go, but you're sacrificing what you kind of were brought up to play, whether it's for your country or whether it's for, the top standard of rugby in Australia. So, yeah, I think kudos to all those unions who are turning around and saying, no, we're making a stand. We're not going to just roll over and let players go and do this so easily, because I think it's the minority that are probably going, oh yeah, I fancy a bit of R360. But I think all it's going to take is for one or two big players to make the move before people go, oh, well, it's actually all right. And I think one person that I feel will do it will be Ellie Kildun in the women's game. And I think if she goes, yeah, because she turned around when it was leaked, when it was starting to come into fruition, she turned around and said, well, it's an option kind of thing. Wow. So I don't think.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's going to take a couple of quite a few dominoes to fall, to be honest, for it to really gain like major traction. I think you're right. A lot of the unions, even rugby league coming out against it, that's a huge step, because you think talent in the NRL is just is awash with it, really. Them coming out as well sort of deals another blow to our 360, but I think they sort of had to come out with that statement there, Dom, really, in terms of to save face, to sort of say, right, we're going to need to stand up and sort of say, all right, we're still back in this, we still think this is the way forward, case entirely. But moving back to on the pitch, or rather pitch selection, we've got a couple of squad announcements for the Autumn Nation series, which of course will be taking place in a number of weeks now. We're all very much looking forward to that. Got the Australian New Zealand squads. Now, as I sort of alluded to earlier with Exeter, we had the Australia squad announced. Not many surprises really, apart from two, with Len Ikitau and Tom Hooper not included in the initial squad, which will mean that I'll miss fixtures against England and Italy. What do you make of that, Dom? Do you think this is just a case of, well, it is what it is, they have to sort of settle down into their new clubs and there's not really much they can do about it? Or do you think it's something that Australia maybe could have done more about? Maybe they could have joined later, or, is it just one of those things?
I think you touched on it quite well earlier that, as much as they probably are, contracted players in the Wallaby squad, they're also contracted at Exeter, so they've got to hold their end of the bargain up and play for them and get used to their system, because they'll want to be playing as much rugby as possible. And when the majority of rugby that you play as a professional comes from club, you've got to put so much time into that. I think they proved that they're going to be playing for the Wallabies for a significant amount of years. They can afford to put that on hold, concentrate on their club rugby with Exeter, and then come back in when it's necessary. And I think, we mentioned it last week. There's a couple of big games that they'll probably want to be back for. That the game in France, for certain. Maybe the one in Dublin as well. So
yeah, well, that's the two games that they are scheduled. Like they would France game. In fact, I think it was maybe just a 2-test thing. So it may just be, obviously they've got a fixture against Japan, which the boys will miss there. So whether they missed the Italy one, I'm not quite sure. I think it was definitely said that they'll miss. For opening twos, Italy as well. Yeah, they'll likely miss England, so he'll.
Shame.
Yeah, well, that's a shame for you, isn't it? Yeah. But apart from that, fairly decent squad. I mean, Dylan Peach coming back into the fray. It'll be interesting to see him. Very much impressed on the Lions tour, especially in that final fixture, scoring that try. He's a great player to watch. Just real. He's just one of those wingers that just runs headfirst into everything. It's just, it'll be good to see him. In terms of New Zealand squad, again, not that many big news points there. We've got Cortez Ratama back in, which is probably the biggest inclusion for them coming back, and it would be probably a second choice 9 really coming in there. There will be no Tupovai, which will be a big miss for them. He's injured, so he'll not be able to play there, so they'll have to rely on a couple other. Fabian Holland probably will step into his position there alongside Scott Barrett, and then Tyrell Lomax, who is of course a very, very good prop, who will be out for them as well. So a couple of missing there as well for New Zealand, Dom. They've got famously the Grand Slam tour, as they're calling it, against the 4 sort of British and Irish nations. Do you think these are huge misses for them, or do you think they've got enough depth to cover it?
I think they've definitely got enough depth to cover it, but sometimes it's still obviously a shame to see. Play. I think Vi is obviously a big one that they'll probably miss out on. But as you allude to, they've got so much quality around the park that it probably won't matter too much. But no, it's just a great squad. I love the All Blacks whenever they play. I love it. Like seeing their squads line up. So yeah, it's just get so excited when I see their team come out.
Yeah, well, you don't always get to see like the All Blacks play, so it's when they come to the autumn and you get a chance to go see it in London or Cardiff or Edinburgh or Dublin, and it's always a great time. I remember going this is a good one for Ireland. Their first win over the All Blacks in Dublin a couple of years, many years ago actually. I think it was 2019 or 2018, 2019. Jacob Stockdale, chip and chase, the Ulster player who got the try in that game, and then Ireland obviously beat them. So yeah, no, I have very fond memories of seeing the All Blacks play. In that case, probably they don't have as fond memories, to be fair, of that game. Yeah. Sure. What about it? What about it? But that's our roundup of everything on this week's Ruck and Roll Show. And thank you very much for watching. We look forward to a couple more of the international squads being announced this week, so that'll give us plenty to talk about, and another round of very interesting fixtures in the URC and the English Prem. But we'll see you next week, and thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.